The night my family finally stopped pretending they loved me, I used the storm to make sure they could not leave. It was Christmas Eve, and the mountain house was sealed under a white sky. No signal, no neighbors, no road, just snow, dark forest, and the fireplace at the heart of the place like a watchful eye. They came up here expecting to finish me off quietly. Instead, I set them against each other so completely they forgot to hate me. And then, before dawn, I made them whole again. Not with speeches, not with forgiveness they did not earn, with cold, with fear, with truth, with fire. My name is Samuel Kessler. I am 71 years old. I am a grandfather. And this is how I turned a Christmas trap into a rescue. It started with the driveway. The tires of my son's SUV ground into fresh powder like it was chewing glass. Headlights swept across the porch, across the pine trunks, across the old porch swing my late wife had painted red when the house was new. For a second the place looked warm and welcoming, like the postcards people send from mountain towns. Then the doors opened and my family climbed out, and the warmth died. Mark came first, my son. 51, broad-shouldered, expensive coat, eyes that learned long ago how to look past a man instead of at him. Behind him was Heather, his wife, wrapped in a scarf that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Their daughter Lila followed, 22, face lit by her phone, thumbs moving like prayer. Last was Nate, my grandson, 25, and already wearing the kind of bitter smile men wear when they want something and feel ashamed about it. My brother Ray arrived 15 minutes after them, as he always does, late and loud with Diane on his arm. Ray's laugh boomed across the trees as if the forest was a room built for his voice. Diane did not laugh. Diane never does unless someone else is bleeding. 8 people total. 8 beds. 1 house. 1 man they did not want to be near. Me. I stood on the porch as they approached, hands behind my back, shoulders squared, listening to the small sounds that told me the mountain was closing in. Snow sliding off branches, wind worrying at the eaves, the distant groan of the pines. "Dad," Mark said, and there it was. Not warmth, not relief. A label. Heather kissed the air beside my cheek. "Merry Christmas, Samuel." Ray slapped my shoulder hard enough to make his point. "Well, look at you. Still standing. Didn't think you'd drag us all up here for nothing." "Come inside," I said. "Before the weather decides we do not deserve it." Nate snorted like I was being dramatic. Lila never looked up. Diane's eyes moved across the house like she was already measuring what she could take. Inside, the mountain house smelled the way it always does in winter, old wood, resin, and the faint iron note of the fireplace stone. I had lit the fire hours ago, stacked oak and birch the way my wife taught me. A steady heat, a steady light. The kind that makes people think they are safe. They stepped into the warmth and still looked cold. Coats came off, boots thumped, bags hit the floor. Small talk tried to pretend it had a pulse. I offered coffee. Heather declined. She always declines, as if accepting anything from me means she owes me a piece of her dignity. Ray poured himself whiskey like it was his house. Mark walked the rooms, checking corners, opening doors. The man had spent his whole life trying to convince himself he was not my son. And somehow he still inherited my need to know the exits. Nate glanced at the mantel where a photo of my late wife stood between 2 candles. In the picture she was laughing, hand on my shoulder, cheeks pink from cold air. Nate looked away quickly, as if the sight of her made him uncomfortable. I watched them all and felt the familiar sting behind my ribs. They hated me. But worse than that, they believed I deserved it. I had raised Mark with a hard hand. I had worked too much. I had said no when people begged. I had cut Ray off when his debts turned poisonous. I had refused to lend Mark the money he demanded when he needed a fresh start. I had refused to sign papers. Heather slid across my table with a smile that never touched her eyes. And when my wife died, when the house went quiet for good, they decided my grief was a weakness they could use. That is why they were here. Not because they missed me, because they thought the mountain would finish what time had started. "Let's do this," Ray said, clapping his hands. "You said you had something important." I nodded and sat in my chair facing the fire. The leather creaked under my weight. I looked at them the way I used to look at new recruits when I ran the training program for the Forest Service crews. Not angry, not pleading, just steady. "I do," I said. "But first we eat. Then we talk." Heather's mouth tightened. "It's late." "The road is worse than it looks," I said. "The storm is coming in faster." Mark glanced toward the windows. Snow already pressed against the glass like something alive. Ray scoffed. "We've driven in snow before." "Yes," I said, "but you have not driven this road in this storm. Not tonight." For a moment I saw it in Mark's face. Irritation, a flicker of worry, and beneath it something else. Calculation. He wanted control back. We ate stew at the long table. I had made it the way my wife used to, thick with potatoes and meat, the kind of food meant to keep men warm in storms. Diane picked at hers like it might be poisoned. Lila pushed food around with her spoon and kept checking her phone even though there was no signal. Nate drank too fast. Ray drank faster. Conversation was sharp-edged. It kept sliding into old wounds. "You still keeping the place alone?" Ray asked. "I am," I said. "Must be lonely." "It is quiet," I corrected. Heather set her spoon down gently. "So why now? Why bring us all here? You've skipped Christmas for years." I looked at the fire, the flames licking up around the logs, and I felt my wife's hands in my memory, guiding mine as we built the first fire in this hearth. She had smiled that night and said, "This will be the heart of our family." I wondered what she would have said if she could see the people sitting here now. "I've been thinking," I said, "about what comes next." Mark's eyes sharpened. "Meaning?" "Meaning I am not a young man," I said. "Meaning the house, the land, the accounts. The things you pretend do not matter until you are alone with your spouse and think I cannot hear." The air changed. Forks paused. Ray's glass stopped mid-lift. Heather's gaze snapped to Mark, quick as a blade. Nate's mouth parted slightly, then shut again. Only Lila looked up, finally, her eyes wide and bright with the kind of interest she never showed me before. Mark gave a small laugh. "Dad, no one's talking about you like that." I held his gaze and let silence do what it does best. The only sound was the pop of the fire. "We should go to bed," Heather said too quickly. "We've got a long drive tomorrow." "There will be no drive tomorrow," I said. Ray snorted. "What is that supposed to mean?" I looked at the window again. The snow had thickened. The wind was rising, pushing against the house like a shoulder. "It means," I said, "the mountain just made my point for me." A gust hit hard enough to rattle the glass. Then the lights went out. Not a flicker. Not a dim. A clean, sudden darkness. The house became a shadow with a fire in its belly. Heather gasped. Diane muttered something low. Nate stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. Ray cursed under his breath and fumbled for his phone like it could conjure power out of the air. Mark's voice cut through. "Dad, generator." I stood slowly, as if my knees were stiff, and not because I wanted them to watch me move at my pace. "I'll check it," I said. "You should have checked it before we got here," Heather snapped. I looked at her and let my face stay calm. "It worked this afternoon." Mark followed me down the hallway toward the mudroom where the generator panel sat. His footsteps were quick, impatient. The man always walked like the world owed him room. In the mudroom, the air was colder. The house's warmth fell away from the fire like a tide. I opened the panel, flipped switches, listened to the quiet. Mark leaned close. "Don't start this," he said. "Start what?" I asked. He swallowed, the way men do when they are trying to choke down their own panic. "This old man theatrics. You brought us up here to lecture us about your will." I turned my head and looked at him in the dim light from the kitchen candles. "You are the one who wants the will," I said softly. "I want the truth." His jaw tightened. Truth about what? I stepped closer, enough that he could smell wood smoke on my sweater. "About the papers you tried to get me to sign," I said. "About the doctor Heather found who was willing to declare me confused. About the way you've been paying my property taxes from an account I didn't authorize, so you could claim later you've been handling my affairs." Mark's face drained. "How do you know that?" he whispered. "I live alone," I said. "I do not live blind." His eyes darted as if he expected someone to appear and save him. I turned back to the panel and flipped the last switch. Nothing happened. Mark let out a breath. "So we're stuck." "We are," I said. "And that is exactly what you came here for, isn't it? A place where I cannot call anyone, where I cannot walk away." He opened his mouth, but he did not answer, because the truth was sitting in his throat like a stone. I walked back into the living room. The others were clustered near the fireplace, drawn to the only light like moths. Ray was already pouring another drink. Nate stood by the window, peering out into the storm. Heather was whispering to Diane, and Diane's eyes flicked to me as if she was evaluating how much trouble it would be to push an old man down a flight of stairs. I sat in my chair again and held my hands toward the fire. "We'll keep the house warm with this," I said. "We've got wood, we've got blankets. The storm will pass." Ray snorted. "How long?" "Maybe by morning," I said. "Maybe longer." Heather's voice was tight. "We have no cell service, no power, no heat besides this." "The fireplace is heat," I said, "and it is more reliable than your intentions." She stared at me as if she wanted to slap that sentence out of my mouth, but could not afford to start a fight yet. Mark cleared his throat. "We should ration," he said. "Food, candles, batteries." I watched him try to take command like a man putting on a coat that does not fit. "Good," I said. "Lead then." He flinched because he heard what was beneath the words. "If you want control, earn it." We moved into the night like chess pieces. Rooms were assigned, bedding dragged out, flashlights shared, and as the storm tightened around the house, so did the old resentment. I did not set them against each other with lies. I did it with the truth they had already been carrying, heavy and sharp, for years. The first spark came from a simple thing, a missing ring. Diane's voice rose in the hallway. "Where is it?" Heather appeared, eyes wide with practiced innocence. "What are you talking about?" "My ring," Diane snapped. "My mother's ring. It was in my bag." Ray lumbered in behind her. "Maybe you dropped it in the car." "I did not," Diane hissed. "Someone went through my bag." Nate's laugh was quick, ugly. "Who would want your ring?" Diane turned on him. "People who are desperate. People who need money." Everyone froze because everyone understood the implication. Nate's eyes flashed. "Are you accusing me?" "I'm saying," Diane said, voice cold, "you have the look of someone who would do it." Ray stepped between them like a referee. "Enough. We're not doing this." But the room had already tilted. I stood by the fire and watched the first crack widen. Later, as they argued, I slipped out into the mudroom and opened the small wall safe behind the hanging coats. Inside were 8 envelopes, each with a name written in my wife's handwriting. She had prepared them years ago, back when she still believed we could fix what was breaking. I had found them after she died and could not bring myself to open them. Tonight, I did. I took out 4. Mark, Heather, Ray, Nate. I returned to the living room and placed the envelopes on the mantel one by one. "What is that?" Heather demanded. Gifts, I said. Ray squinted. Those are your wife's letters. Yes, I said. She wrote them in case something happened to her. She wanted each of you to have her words. Heather's expression softened for half a second, then hardened again. Why now? I looked at her. Because we are trapped, I said. And when people are trapped, they stop performing. Mark reached for his envelope. Not yet, I said. His hand stopped. I held up my palm like a stop sign. You will open them one at a time, I said. And when you do, you will read them out loud. Ray barked a laugh. No. I kept my gaze steady. Then you can sit in the dark and listen to the wind, I said. I have time. Silence. The fire crackled. Mark picked up his envelope, and I watched the muscles in his jaw work. He tore it open and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. His voice was rough as he read. My sweet Mark, the letter began. I love you, but I am afraid of what you become when you think love is a transaction. Mark's face tightened. He kept reading. You carry anger like a tool. You use it to control the people you cannot understand. Your father is not perfect, but he has never stopped loving you. The day you learn to admit your own fear, you will stop trying to inherit a life you did not earn. Mark's hands shook. He folded the paper like it burned him. Heather stepped forward. That is enough. We're not doing this. I looked at her envelope on the mantel. You next, I said. Her laugh was thin. I will not read anything. Then Diane spoke, soft and sharp. Read it. Heather turned, startled. Excuse me? Diane's eyes were hard. If we are stuck here, then we might as well be entertained. Heather stared at her. The two women had never liked each other. Heather thought Diane was cheap. Diane thought Heather was fake. Now the storm had made them honest. Heather snatched her envelope, tore it open, and read with a voice that tried to sound steady. My dear Heather, my wife's letter began. I see you. I see how you smile like a shield. I see how you speak sweetly while you measure the room. Heather's cheeks flushed. I do not blame you for wanting security, but I do blame you for teaching my granddaughter that love is only worth what it can buy. Lila's head snapped up. Heather's voice faltered, and then she read the line that changed everything. If you are reading this, you have already tried to take what is not yours. You will tell Mark you are protecting him, but the truth is simpler. You do not believe you are safe unless you are in control. Heather stopped reading. Nate laughed once, bitter. She wrote you like a police report. Heather's eyes flashed. Be quiet. Nate leaned forward. Or what? You'll cut me out of the will, too? The words landed like a dropped plate. Mark turned to him. What did you just say? Nate's smile slipped. Nothing. Mark stepped toward him. You just said the will, he repeated. You care about the will. Nate's jaw clenched. Everyone cares about the will. Ray's laugh boomed. Finally, honesty. Mark turned to Ray. And you? You do not care? Ray lifted his glass. I care about not freezing to death in your father's museum. Diane's gaze cut to him. Do not pretend, she said. You came for money. Ray's face darkened. We came because he asked. Diane's laugh was quiet and cruel. You came because Mark promised there was something in it for us. Mark's head snapped toward her. What? Diane shrugged like she was bored. Do not look surprised. You two were whispering in the driveway, Ray told me later. Ray's eyes widened. Diane, stop. But she was already enjoying herself. He said you were going to get your father to sign new paperwork, Diane continued. Something about power of attorney. Something about selling this place. Mark's face turned red. Ray, what did you tell her? Ray spread his hands. I told her what you told me. Mark's voice rose. I told you in confidence. Ray stepped closer, looming. Confidence. Like you had confidence in me when you cut me out years ago? Mark's eyes narrowed. I cut you out because you were stealing from Dad. Ray's laugh exploded. Stealing? I borrowed. You were the one siphoning money from the company. The room went silent again, because that was not a story anyone had told out loud before. Nate's eyes widened. Heather's mouth parted. Lila stared at her father like she was seeing him for the first time. Mark's voice dropped. That is a lie. Ray's face was flushed with drink and old resentment. Is it? Because I remember the account. I remember the numbers. And I remember Dad covering for you because he could not bear to see you fall. Mark turned to me slowly. I sat by the fire and said nothing, because my silence was the answer. Heather's voice was thin. Mark, is that true? Mark's jaw worked. It was a loan, he snapped. From the business. I paid it back. Ray barked a laugh. No, you did not. You rolled it into another account and called it an investment. Nate's voice cut in. Dad, what the hell? Mark spun on him. Do not talk to me like that. Nate's hands clenched. You lecture me about responsibility while you were stealing? Heather stepped between them. Stop, she said. Stop right now. But no one listened. That is what snow does. It makes the walls close in. It makes voices bounce back. It makes the small resentments grow teeth. By midnight, the house had turned into a pressure cooker. And I was not done. Because a ring was one thing. The real poison was always deeper. At 2 a.m, when most of them had stumbled to their rooms, I sat alone by the fire and listened. Old houses speak. Wood contracts. Stone settles. Wind presses against corners. And footsteps tell you more than words ever do. I heard soft steps on the staircase, not Ray, who moved like a bear, not Mark, who paced like a man thinking. Lila moved light, like a shadow. I did not turn my head. I let her think I was lost in the fire. She crossed behind me and paused at the cabinet where I keep my medication. I heard the cabinet open, then the soft click of a bottle, then the whisper of plastic as something was poured out. My hands tightened on the arms of my chair. A moment later, Lila moved toward the kitchen. I waited until her footsteps vanished. Then I stood and opened the cabinet. My heart did not race. I had been trained to stay calm when the forest burned and men panicked. But something in my chest went cold. My blood pressure pills were missing. Not the whole bottle, just enough to hurt. I sat back down and stared into the fire. So that was it. They were not only here to take, they were here to weaken me. I stood and walked quietly to the kitchen. On the counter was a mug of cocoa, steam faint in the cold air, a sweet smell, chocolate. Something else under it, sharp and chemical. I leaned close, careful, and touched the rim with my fingertip. Then I touched my tongue. Bitter. Not cocoa. Medication. I set the mug down. Then I turned and walked to Mark's door. I knocked once. He opened it with a face already irritated. What? He snapped. I held the mug up. Tell me what is in this. His eyes flicked to it. Cocoa. Smell it, I said. His nostrils flared. His face changed slightly. Not confusion. Recognition. He stepped back, letting me into the room. Heather sat up in bed, hair messy, eyes sharp. She looked at the mug and then at me. What is going on? She demanded. I believe, I said calmly, someone in this house would like me asleep. Heather's face hardened. That is ridiculous. Mark's gaze was locked on the mug. Dad, I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. I found my pills missing, I said, and I found this. Someone thought if I took it I would be too groggy to think, too weak to argue, Too easy to sign. Heather's face flushed. How dare you? Mark's voice was low. Dad, who would do that? I looked at him. That is what I am asking you. Heather's eyes flicked away, fast. Too fast. Mark saw it. I watched the moment his certainty cracked. Heather, he said quietly, what did you do? Heather's voice rose. I did nothing. Mark stepped closer. You were the one telling me we needed him calm, he said. You said he gets stubborn when he's emotional. Heather's eyes flared. I was trying to help. Mark's voice sharpened. Did you take his pills? Heather's mouth opened, then closed. Then she hissed. It was only a little. He was not going to die. He was going to sleep. He was going to stop fighting us for one night. Mark stared at her like she was a stranger. And there it was, the first real betrayal of the night. Not between me and them, between them and each other. I set the mug down on Mark's dresser. I am going to gather everyone, I said. We will talk by the fire, right now. Heather snapped. It's the middle of the night. The mountain does not care what time it is, I said. Neither do I. By the time we were all in the living room again, bleary and angry, the fire had burned low and the house had a colder edge to it. Nate came in last, jaw tight. Ray looked half awake, still holding a glass. Diane's eyes were bright. Lila hovered in the corner, arms crossed, face pale. I held up the mug. This, I said, was made for me tonight. Ray scoffed. What is that? Cocoa, I said, with my pills crushed into it. Silence. Nate's gaze snapped to Lila. Lila, what did you do? Lila's eyes flashed. I did not do anything. I watched her carefully. Someone went into my cabinet, I said. Someone took medication that belongs to me. Someone tried to slip it to me while the house was dark. Heather spoke first, voice sharp. It was not poison. Mark turned on her. You admitted it. Ray blinked. You did what? Heather threw her hands up. It was a sedative night. He's been difficult for months. Nate's face went white. You drugged him? Heather's eyes burned. Do not talk to me like I'm a criminal. We were trying to keep him calm so we could have a conversation. A conversation? I repeated. I turned to Lila. And you were helping, I said. Lila's chin lifted. I did not put anything in his drink. I nodded slowly. No, I said. You just took the pills. Her face twitched. Nate stepped toward her. Lila, tell me you did not. Lila's voice cracked. It was Mom's idea. Heather's head snapped. Do not you dare. Lila's eyes filled, not with shame, but with anger. You told me to, she said. You said if Grandpa slept, you could get Dad to sign and then everything would be easier. You said Grandpa would never know. The room exploded. Mark shouted. Heather shouted back. Nate slammed a hand against the wall. Ray laughed once, ugly and stunned. Diane watched like a woman watching a knife fight. And in the middle of it, I stood still. Because my revenge was not a fist. It was a mirror. I let them see themselves. I let them hear the words they usually whispered in cars and kitchens. And when the noise finally broke into ragged silence, I said the next sentence like a hammer. Tomorrow morning, I said, we walk out. Mark blinked. The road? The road is closed, I said, but there is a ranger station 4 miles through the forest. If we leave at dawn, we can make it. Heather stared at me like I was insane. Through that storm? The storm is easing, I said, but the cold will kill you if you do not move. Ray scoffed. So your plan is to march us through the woods like a survival exercise? Yes, I said, because you came here to corner an old man. Now you will learn what happens when you corner the wrong one. Mark's voice was tight. Dad, you can't. I held up a hand. You will come, I said. All of you. Together. Or you will stay here in the dark and keep tearing each other apart until someone does something they cannot take back. Diane tilted her head. And what do you get out of that? I looked at her. I get the truth, I said, and I get to see if there is anything left worth saving. The fire popped. Outside, the wind moaned through the pines. For a long time, no one spoke. Then Nate said quietly, Fine. Mark glanced at him. Nate. Nate's eyes were hard. I'm done, he said. I'm done being part of whatever this is. I'll walk. Lila swallowed. Diane shrugged like it was entertainment. Ray swayed, then grunted. Fine. Heather's mouth tightened, but she did not argue. At dawn, the forest swallowed us. The sky was still gray, the kind of gray that makes snow look like ash. We bundled in layers, scarves, gloves. I handed out old snowshoes from the mudroom, the kind my wife and I used when we were younger. Mark stared at the gear. You planned this. I live here, I said. Planning is how you survive. We moved into the trees. Snow muffled sound. The world became close and quiet, like it was holding its breath. Pine boughs sagged under weight. Our boots sank. The cold bit any skin it could find. The forest has a way of stripping people down. In the first mile, their voices disappeared. No arguments, no clever comments. Just breathing and the crunch of snow. In the second mile, fear began to show. Ray lagged behind, panting. Diane's lips turned pale. Heather's eyes flicked around like she expected the trees to accuse her. Lila stumbled twice and grabbed Nate's arm. Nate did not pull away. Mark walked close to me, silent. Finally, he said, Why are you doing this? I did not look at him. Because your mother begged me to, I said. He stiffened. What? I stopped, letting the others catch up, and looked back at the line of my family moving through the trees like strangers forced into the same story. Your mother wrote those letters, I said. She left instructions. She wanted me to bring you together. She knew this would happen. Mark's face tightened. You could have called us. I did, I said. For years. You did not answer unless you wanted something. His jaw worked. We kept walking. Half a mile later, the ground changed. Snow thinned, and I saw it before anyone else did. A wind-scoured slope ahead, hard-packed and slick, with a shallow drift hiding an old runoff channel beneath. I lifted a hand. Slow. Ray, behind us, was distracted by his own breath. He stepped wrong. The snow gave way under his foot. He slipped, arms flailing. Diane screamed. Ray slid sideways, and for a second all I saw was a man's body tipping toward a darker gap between rocks. Mark lunged. Nate grabbed Ray's coat. Heather grabbed Nate's arm. It happened fast. Ray's weight yanked them all toward the edge. Lila cried out, Dad! I dropped to my knees and drove my ice axe into the hard snow, the metal biting, stopping my own slide. I reached out and caught Mark's wrist, feeling the tendons strain. For a moment we were a chain of bodies in a white world, one mistake away from disaster. Mark's voice came out raw. Hold! Nate's teeth clenched. I've got him! Ray's face was twisted with fear, the drink gone from his eyes. I dug my boots in. On 3, I said. No one argued. 1, I said. The wind hissed. 2, Heather's hand shook. 3! We pulled together. Ray slid back onto solid ground with a grunt, sprawled like a man thrown from a fight. He lay there, gasping, eyes wide, looking at the drop he almost fell into. Diane sank to her knees beside him, trembling. For a long time no one spoke. Then Ray whispered, I nearly died. Nate's voice was tight. Yes. Ray looked up at him, and I saw something I had not seen in years. Not arrogance, not resentment, just a brother's son looking at an older man and realizing he is not immortal. Mark stared at Ray, breathing hard, and then looked at me. In his eyes was the question he could not speak. Did you plan that too? I shook my head once. The mountain does not take orders, I said. We stood. We kept walking. By the time the ranger station appeared through the trees, the sky had lightened. Smoke rose from its chimney, thin and gray. Relief hit them like warmth. A ranger opened the door and stared at us like we were ghosts. "Road's closed," he said. "What are you people doing out here?" "Family business," I said. He studied our faces, the way people do when they sense something dangerous is not only weather. Then he nodded once and stepped aside. Inside, the station was warm and smelled of coffee. A radio crackled. The ranger made calls. Plows would clear the road by afternoon, he said. We would be able to drive out. Heather let out a breath like she had been holding it for years. Mark sat on a bench, elbows on knees, head bowed. Ray stared at his hands like they belonged to a different man. And Nate stood near the window watching the forest, jaw tight. I stepped outside for a moment and let the cold air clear my lungs. When I came back in, Mark looked up. "Dad," he said quietly, "you could have called for help last night." "Yes," I said. He blinked. "You had a way?" "I have a satellite phone," I said, "locked away." Heather's head snapped up. "You kept us trapped on purpose." I held her gaze. "I kept you in the house," I said. "The storm kept you trapped. There is a difference." Nate's voice was low. "You let it happen." "I let the truth happen," I corrected. Mark stood slowly. "You humiliated us." I nodded once. "Yes," I said. "Because you were willing to drug me, to steal my medicine, to turn my home into a courtroom where I was the defendant." Mark's face tightened. "We didn't," Heather cut in. "We were trying to protect our family." I looked at her. "From what?" I asked. "From being responsible for your own lives?" Silence. The ranger cleared his throat awkwardly and walked away, pretending to check paperwork. I turned toward all of them. "I am going to say this once," I said. "You do not get my life by force. You do not get my wife's house by paperwork. You do not get to turn my grandchildren into thieves." Lila flinched. Nate's eyes lowered. Mark's mouth opened, then closed again. Ray swallowed. "So what happens now?" I took a breath. The answer was in the fireplace back at the house, in the letters my wife wrote, in the way Ray's hand had reached without hesitation to save Mark, and Mark had reached to save Ray, and Nate had grabbed them both. They hated each other, but when the mountain tried to take one, their bodies moved as one. That was the only reason this was not just a story about revenge. It was a story about repair. "We go back," I said. "We finish Christmas, and then we decide what kind of family we are." Heather's laugh was bitter. "You think we can just sit around the fireplace and pretend none of this happened?" "No," I said. "We sit around the fireplace and stop pretending." Back at the mountain house that afternoon, the power was still out, but the storm had eased. The air was sharp and clean, the snow sparkling like broken glass under pale sun. The fireplace was still warm. The embers had held, stubborn and faithful, like my wife always was. We gathered in the living room, exhausted, quiet. I placed a stack of papers on the table. Mark's eyes narrowed. "What is that?" "My will," I said. Heather's body went still. Ray leaned forward. Nate's breath caught. I watched their faces and felt something like sorrow. Because even now, after everything, part of them still wanted the old game. I slid the top page toward Mark. "It is a trust," I said, "not a prize." Mark swallowed. "Dad?" "Listen," I said, and my voice did not rise, but it carried. "This house stays in the family, but no one owns it alone. Not you, not Ray, not Heather. The trust will maintain it. It will pay taxes. It will pay repairs. Heather's eyes flicked with calculation. And, I continued, no one can sell it. Ray's face tightened. So we get nothing. You get a place, I said. A place your mother believed could hold us together. Mark's voice was tight. And the rest? I tapped the next pages. The rest goes to Lila and Nate, I said. Education, housing support, a start that is theirs. But only if they do not let their parents use them as tools. Heather bristled. That's... I held up a hand. And there is one condition, I said. Everyone went still. Diane leaned forward like a vulture expecting meat. You will sit with a counselor, I said. A family counselor. 8 sessions. All of you who are adults. If you refuse, the trust remains, the house remains, but the financial support for anyone who refuses disappears. It will go to a charity my wife chose. Mark stared at me. You're trying to control us. I nodded. Yes, I said, because you tried to control me. Silence stretched. Then Nate spoke, voice low. I'll do it. Heather turned on him. Nate? Nate's gaze was hard. I'm tired, he said. I'm tired of hearing you and Dad talk about Grandpa like he's a bank account. I'm tired of watching us tear each other apart and pretend it's normal. Lila's eyes filled. Me too, she whispered. Mark looked like he had been punched. Ray's shoulders sagged. 8 sessions, he muttered. Fine. Diane's eyes narrowed. You want us to confess? She said. I want us to stop lying, I said. Heather's mouth trembled. For a moment she looked like she might refuse out of sheer pride. Then she looked at Lila. Really looked. And something in her softened, small and raw. Fine, she said quietly. Fine. That night, we sat around the fireplace again. Not because it was cozy. Because it was the only thing in the house that did not lie. We cooked what we could. We ate in silence at first. Then, slowly, words came out. Not polite words. Not easy ones. Ray admitted the gambling debts. Mark admitted the stolen money from years ago, how he never fully paid it back, how he resented me for holding the power to forgive him. Heather admitted she was terrified of ending up poor, terrified of losing control, terrified of being nothing without Mark's success. Nate admitted he had been planning to sue me if the inheritance did not go his way, because he felt trapped in a life he did not choose. Lila admitted she took the pills because she thought it was normal to do what her mother asked, even if it felt wrong. Diane admitted she enjoyed watching everyone else break because it made her feel less small. And then, when the room was quiet again, I reached into the mantel and pulled out the last envelope, the one my wife had written to me. My hands shook when I opened it. I read her words by firelight, my voice rough. Sam, she wrote, if you are reading this, it means I am gone and you are still standing. I know you. You will want to punish them. You will want to shut the door and lock it. But remember what we built. This fireplace is not for warmth alone. It is for gathering. It is for truth. If you can make them face each other, do it. But do not leave them broken. You were a man made to protect. Protect what is left. I stopped reading, throat tight. Nate's eyes were wet. Lila wiped her cheek. Mark stared into the fire like he could burn his shame away. Ray's hands were clasped together like a man praying. Heather's shoulders shook once, small. For the first time in years, the house did not feel like a battlefield. It felt like a place where a family could begin again, ugly and imperfect and real. I stood, walked to the fire, and held the crushed pill cocoa mug over the flames. I am not going to pretend this did not happen, I said, but I am also not going to let it define us. I dropped the mug into the fire. The ceramic cracked with heat. The smell of cocoa and bitterness rose, then vanished into smoke. One by one, they brought their own symbols of the night. Diane pulled her ring from her pocket and tossed it into Ray's lap. "I found it in the car," she said flatly. "I wanted a reason to start a fight." Ray stared at it, then at her. "Why?" Diane looked away. "Because I hate being invisible." Ray's voice softened, the first softness I'd heard from him in years. "You don't have to do that," he said. Mark took a breath, reached into his wallet, and pulled out a folded piece of paper. A photocopy of the power of attorney form Heather had brought. He held it to the fire. Heather reached out, then stopped herself. The paper caught, blackened, curled. Mark watched it burn with a face like grief. Nate stood next, pulled out his phone, and placed it on the mantel. "I'm not recording you," he said quietly, looking at me. "I was going to. I'm not." I nodded once. Then Lila stepped forward, small in the firelight, and said the sentence that mattered most. "Grandpa," she whispered, "I'm sorry." I looked at her and felt something loosen in my chest that had been tight for years. "I know," I said. "Now do better." Christmas morning came with a pale sun and a world so white it hurt to look at. We had no power, but we had heat. We had coffee boiled on the hearth. We had eggs cooked in a cast-iron pan over the fire like my wife used to do when the storms were bad. We ate together at the long table. No one smiled much, but no one fought. After breakfast, Nate and Ray went out to clear the porch steps. Mark chopped wood, steady and quiet, not because I told him to, but because the house needed it. Heather helped Lila braid her hair by the window, hands gentle, voice low. For the first time in a long time, the mountain house sounded like life. That afternoon, when the plows finally reached our road and the world opened again, they could have left. None of them rushed for the door. They packed slowly. They hugged awkwardly. They said things like, "We'll call." And for once it did not sound like a threat. Mark lingered last, standing by the fireplace. He stared at the stone, at the soot-darkened logs, at the place where his mother's hands had once warmed. "Dad," he said quietly, "I don't know how to fix what I did." I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said, "You already started," and I meant it. He nodded once, eyes wet, and walked out into the snow. When the house was quiet again, I sat by the fireplace and listened to the forest settle. Snow had trapped us. The forest had humbled us. The fire had told the truth. And somehow, against every bitter expectation in my heart, that was enough to make my relatives break apart and then, piece by piece, begin to stitch themselves back together. Not perfect, not clean, but whole enough to keep trying, whole enough to deserve another Christmas.
My grandpa's worst really happened. I believe him. If you want more true tales like this, hit subscribe.